the number one thing I hear a lot of times when they're in the midst of the crap, I think it's time for me to quit. Do you think I should quit? No. You just hit a bump. We don't think about quitting, and we don't argue with God. Because when you're suffering, when you are in the midst of the crap, it's not the time to evaluate your faith or your job.
This is gonna hurt. It's time for the Suffering Podcast.
In those very early years. And so I do believe that things you suffer from, even in the womb, in utero, you hear what's going on. You're the person carrying you. What are they eating? What are they drinking? What are they ingesting? Right?
Smoking back in the day.
What are they smoking? What are they listening to? And I do believe that children they get that mental and physical and emotional nutrition by that person carrying them.
But that's part of the especially my own personal story, and it really scared me because I was such a monster. I was always afraid it was going to affect my children, and it really pushed me a little bit harder to seek some real true help. So I get that. I get that a lot because no rational parent wants to affect their children long term, and there's that fine line between trying
to affect them negatively. Negatively.
Yeah,
and I'm the one who can't talk. But there's that fine line between disciplining a child properly and trying to raise good adults and really coming down on them. And I can't say I'm successful all the time. I try to be, but there's no rule book on that. There's no
some of the best lessons I learned was because of a hard slap in the ass growing up. You know, you do something wrong, you get that smack in the ass. So there's a way of discipline, and then there's a way of abusing also.
Correct.
Well, we could do better as a society the way we train our children. I do see a lack in discipline and a lack in manners and a lack in quality parenting. But I would say that how you are, and I did research on this, and that's why I'm so passionate about it, because by the time you're 2 or 3 or 4 years old, research has proven that you've downloaded enough in your mental DNA, I call it, that subconscious, you've downloaded enough to take you well into your adult years. And so many times, and think about it, your own parents and caregivers, they acted out of what they knew because of their parents and caregivers. So it's cyclical and it's generational. And until we stop the generational dysfunction, it's never going to change.
See, I've never touched my kids. I've never laid a hand on them because I had that done to me and it didn't work. It actually worked the opposite. I became a little asshole because I was hit. I'm like, well, if you're going to hit me, I'm just going to be a bigger asshole.
Right.
I'm going to deserve it.
I'm going to deserve it. If you're going to find me guilty of something, I'm really going to do it. But in that same breath, I am able to look at my children and have them bring it down. I'm able to just give them a look. And,
Good.
You know, I'm able to give another guy a look, like cut the shit or I'm going to cut your thumbs off. That look. And usually that calms the situation down. Usually, sometimes it escalates the situation. But I don't think hitting, like I'm a big believer. I don't think hitting children is the right thing to do. I just don't. There has to be some sort of threat. They have to have something over their head. But would you agree with that? Is that a fair assessment?
I'm not a parenting expert, and, I don't try to tell parents how to parent their children because all children are different. Some children respond better to a timeout. Some children respond better to just a little bit of a talking to. Some children respond better to a flick of the wrist and, otherwise you're going to put your finger in the socket. Are you running with a fork? There has to be a level of discipline, age appropriate, and child personality appropriate.
Because every kid's different. Every person is different. What works for you might not work for me.
Yeah.
The first thing I did when I moved out of my parents' house is I ran around my apartment with scissors.
I used to tell people all the time, raise your own kids.
Yeah.
You raise your kids.
Yeah.
I'll raise my kids the way I raise them. You raise your kids the way you raise them.
Yeah. And
every kid's different.
I think you're right. Because, I had 2 brothers, a sister, and myself. All 4 of us were completely different. And it's because we're all wired differently. What are we experiencing in utero? What are we experiencing when we're 2 or 3 or 4 years old, right? Parents change over the years.
And how are you channeling that?
How are you channeling that? That's a great point.
What I
I
found,
come up with them once in a while.
But it's a good one. We should piggyback on that.
I prefer to challenge my children, to keep them occupied, because for me, I was very bored. In kindergarten, they wanted to keep me back, and because I was so bored just sitting there, and I coloring or whatever. Mike still colors, but I just didn't want. I had no
Coloring is therapy.
Exactly.
I
Thank
had
you.
no interest in coloring. I had no interest in kindergarten things. I had interest in math and English and history. Those were my interests. And once I found my interest, I was able to stay much more focused and disciplined. So with my children, and I'm not telling anybody this is the way to do it. I'm telling you what worked for my children is to keep them occupied, to keep them focused, because I think idle mind really is a bad thing for
An
children.
idle mind is a devil's playground.
Correct.
Mhm.
Correct.
Yeah, that's true.
When you got into therapy, was it when you were this young, idealistic therapist, you're going to go out there and make a difference and change the world? We've all done that in every profession in the country. Was it what you thought it was?
No. So my background is social work because I wanted to change the world. I wanted to be, a voice for the voiceless, an advocate for the underdog. And I wanted to be out there making sure everybody had food in their bellies and a roof over their head and clothes on their back and education. That is not what happened.
I have a great social worker
Reality
story.
smacked you right in the face.
Yeah.
My wife had a friend who
Which
was
is why I went into private practice.
my wife had a friend who was same mindset, going to go out there and change the world. Social work is for this. And one day she was over the house and we're all sitting around talking, and I'm talking about, I was a police officer at the time, and we're talking about end of life quality. I made the statement, I don't care who you are. I don't care how much money you have. I don't care how famous you are. At the end of your life, you have no dignity.
No.
Very few times do we die like John Wayne in the old Westerns with famous last words. It doesn't happen like that. Usually you shit your pants. Usually everybody's walking in. You're surrounded by people naked, and you're really at your worst.
How many DOAs have you gone on? And not one person had a smile on their face.
So this woman who really had no real world experience was trying to tell me, no, it's not like that. We can give them dignity at the end of their life. We can give them dignity. I said, you can try, but when you're at your last moments and you're just getting off the toilet, there's no dignity in that. Couple years after that, when she was out in the field, she came back to me and said, you know what, you were right. You were right. And I said, I know, I've seen it. You go to one call and somebody's grandmother is standing there with no shirt on, and you go to the next call and somebody's grandfather's standing there with no pants on.
Yeah, heard those stories from my son.
I've seen far too many last breaths, and
Yes,
there was
Pain.
no dignity in any of that.
Pain, crying,
Yep.
fear, all of those things. Now, how did you deal with that as a new therapist?
I was very emotionally challenged, and I'm a pretty strong girl. I'm a strong woman. I've been through a lot. I like to call myself somebody who is grace with grit. But there were certain clients or families that I had, that I was responsible for that really kind of tugged at my heart. So how I handled it was I would turn it inward, as I did everything as a little child. And I would learn how to cope with it and process it. And I'm the kind of person that needs to be alone to process. I need to be walking out in nature. Some people like to go sit at the bar and laugh with friends or go to a party or go visit friends or phone a friend. I'm not like that. I need to be by myself.
But that's a form of anesthetation. I think that's
being
a word.
alone.
Being just to anesthetize the feelings that you're going through at that particular time. Not being alone, but going to the bar, being out with friends.
We can get into that too.
Yeah, that's like you're pushing that stuff back.
Yeah.
And trying to change the mood.
Right.
But
Getting temporary relief.
Eventually you got to deal with things head on, correct?
But what I was going to say was
Prairie fire.
I Prairie fire.
Prairie fire.
I like that.
Hashtag prairie fire.
Episode 9.
I've hashtagged that, just so you know.
All right. I will not hashtag your hashtag.
Oh, you can share it.
Okay.
You can
Thank
share it.
you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Just getting back to that, I mean, episode 9. If you ever,
That's his episode, just so you know.
All right. Episode 9. I'm making
Professor
a mental
T.
note. Now, let me clarify what I was saying. I learned. I mean, that's why I continually up-leveled in my education, because people ask me that all the time. I'm trained. Now, you put me in a domestic violence situation, I have no idea. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm not trained in that. But I'm trained with mental health. I'm trained with suffering. I'm trained with grief. I'm trained with trauma. So as you grow, as you go, you learn how to handle those situations. And as you age, right, you learn as you go. So it has a lot to do with your education and investing in yourself. You learn how to get through all of those things. And yeah, there were nights I went home and just cried my eyeballs out, knowing that that child is going back into that home, or that woman is going back to that marriage, or that man is going back to that job. Those are things that never leave your memory. Being with someone when they are facing the death of a child or a parent or a spouse.
I have seen that. Yes, that is rough.
And I found that there are certain things that I took home with, but that's part of life. That's part of human nature. We're human. We hurt when people hurt. That's why we do what we do. You're doing what you do. You do what you do. I do what I do, because we genuinely care. Now, if it's affecting your health, if it's affecting your family, then it's time maybe to think about getting professional help as a professional.
Correct.
Or taking a break.
you know, just touching on what you said before, when you see someone when they know what the outcome is going to be. I ran into that last week.
Oh yeah.
Found out a friend of mine I've known for years has pretty much inoperable cancer. And I went to see him the other day, and he said, "I'm just playing a waiting game now."
So how did you deal with that?
Wow.
Did you?
So
did you?
sorry.
Run
I just want to say, Phil, we're all pulling for you, man.
Did you run to the bar?
No. What I did is I went out in the hallway and hugged a friend that I went there with, and we both cried.
Should have went to the Grand Saloon. We've been to. We should have taken you out to the Grand Saloon. It's one of our sponsors, 940 Van Houten Ave.
Okay.
Grand Saloon. I'm not saying run to the bar and run away from your problems,
No.
but at least there you get
But you
some.
can run away for some food.
You get some friendly.
Well, I was going to
conversation.
say maybe another time to come up here and do another show.
Oh,
or,
yeah, absolutely.
A mother and son.
We'll meet early, and we'll go out to dinner.
Meet early and
meet
stay
early.
late.
And the next time we'll bring Charlie, because
Yes,
Charlie and
Charlie.
Professor T know each other. So it's an odd thing, because when the idealism of what you thought it was, it's really a dream killer. I found this when I first got out of college. I wanted to be a teacher, and I was a very idealistic teacher. I was going to go out there and I was going to sculpt these young minds. And then when I got into it and I realized what the other teachers were like, you son of a bitches, I hate this job. I hated it. And I woke up one morning, and this is something that I just had a conversation with somebody today. I hated that job so much. I woke up and I said, I can't do this anymore. And I went in and I put in my note to say at the end of the year, I will no longer be teaching. So when we get into these bad spots and this idealism of your professions start to leave us, at what point do you think it goes back to the social media question. You can just walk away from these jobs. You can just walk away from these jobs. It's the easiest solution. If your therapy is hurting your soul or police work is hurting our soul, why can't you just quit and find something that's a true love? Because what's the sense of being unhappy? But you found a different direction. You do a lot of focus on military and first responders. How did you reach there? Or we're just so messed up that you'll have an everlasting
I was
set
going
of
to say
business.
there's an influx of work coming that way. So she
It's like being a mortician. You will never run out of clients.
Yeah.
So how did you find that path?
Thank you for that question. And that is that is my passion. So I got a job. One of my very first jobs was a drug and alcohol therapist in a local hospital in our area. And
Big surprise you ran into first responders.
No, actually did not run into first responders. And so there was one of my mentors there who was showing me the ropes and helping me preparing to get my clinical licensure. We're still friends today. He said that I'm starting this chaplains organization. It's a nonprofit organization. We're going to specifically help first responders, law enforcement. I would like for you to become a part of this team for the mental health aspect. I think you would be good at it. And so I became a member. My son happened to he was working for State Farm at the time. But over a series of events,
His name's not Jake, is it?
I was going to say your other son, Jake.
That's funny. My son ended up working for the sheriff's department in our county. And then I just started meeting different people and I joined this organization. And it's been over 8 years I've been a part of this organization. But that's how I got involved. I started seeing the other side of things, how the law enforcement, the first responders suffer, what they're going through. And my heart just broke because we started reaching out to them. We work with all 64 police departments in our area, as well as the 911 center, emergency services, first responders, fire, EMTs. And I just saw how they were suffering and they had nobody to talk to. Because here's what I want to say. This is the crux of why I'm passionate about law enforcement. Because they don't want to tell anybody they're suffering. Then they're afraid it's going to go on their record. Then they're afraid they're going to be put into a psych unit. Then they're afraid they're going to lose their job. Then they're afraid they're going to have to take medication. Then they're afraid everybody's going to think that they're weak.
Damn, I got every one of these.
Yeah, exactly.
I got every one of them.
That's our big problem with mental health issues these days in specifically law enforcement, first responders in general. They're afraid to talk to someone because now they're going to be pigeonholed.
Stigmatized.
They're going to be that guy with the problem. You know, they're afraid to, one of the most emasculating things is they come and take your gun away from you. It could be the most emasculating thing to a cop.
Yeah.
You know, and nobody wants to go get the help they need because they're afraid of, like Kevin said, being stigmatized.
And that's why I talk about dropping the D in the PTSD. And I know the D is there for billing purposes and treatment purposes and diagnosis purposes. However, when you put that D on the end of post-traumatic stress, you stigmatize it. And as we just talked about, people are going to be very hesitant to go seek help. And we want to try to get rid of that hesitancy. We've said this before on this podcast. If we break our arm, we don't have calcium bone deficiency disorder. We have a broken arm. We have an injury. Once we start seeing post-traumatic stress as more of an injury and not as a disorder, that can be cured, just like a broken arm can heal. Mental health can be cured. And I think that's something that's so important for
It's vital.
Right. Once you're stuck in that mental bubble, you can get out of it and you can go back to work. You're not going to lose your career. I think it's changing. I know when Mike and I were on, it wasn't. That was a real worry that we had.
Okay. I don't like to use the word cured because to me that connotates a sickness, a disease. I don't use the word
a disorder.
Cured. Thank you. So
we got to erase. Now we got to get rid of cured. I'm going to be stuck with like the and podcast.
Okay. Because they're also using the word post-traumatic stress syndrome. Okay. Do you have a syndrome?
I said change the D in PTSD to damage. It's post-traumatic stress damage.
Okay, but why do we need to call anything anything?
Because everything needs a label these days.
Because everything needs a label these days. Because we want to be able, in our minds, we want to be able to put it in a box with a bow on it and have closure and make it make sense.
Or use it as a crutch.
And listen, I worked in corporate. I saw insurance companies make billions of dollars. I saw hospitals make millions of dollars. Now, this is where lots of therapists and doctors and colleagues part ways with me. Sometimes they just want you to stay sick, stay unhealthy, okay? Stay mentally challenged, whatever words you want to use.
It's mentally challenged.
Okay, so that's why we put a label on it because, and this is another reason why I stopped taking insurance, because I don't want all right, I'm not going to go down this road because that's not this podcast. That's another podcast. Show. But what I found was I I have to bill for something. People would, I want to use my insurance so that I don't have to pay you, or I only have to pay you $5. Well, I have to diagnose you with something. Well, I don't want you to diagnose me with something. Well, I have to if you want to use your insurance. Okay.
Right.
So part A is, let's get away from trying to make sense of everything and put a label on it. Okay. There are things in life that we don't need to label. It's a mindset. It's in the book. I've worked with people. They got off medication. I worked with people who had PTSD, schizophrenia, anxiety, depression. They're just labels. They're terms. Okay. You can work through them. We're human. We suffer. We hurt.
I think the most important thing you just said there, we can work through them. You're not stuck here forever. Forever is a long term.
Yeah.
It's a overwhelming term to think about.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it's important that first responders need somebody like you to show them that you can get through this.
And we call that normalization. You normalize the feelings. And that's why I decided, when I went in with this organization that I've been with for 8 years, and then got certified in trauma and stress management for first responders, what I found was they responded well when I said, just give them my number. They can come to my office. They can call me on the phone. We can have a Zoom, a FaceTime. Let's talk. How you doing? No money exchanged, no papers filled out, just your name. And, in case I need to know, medication, or who do I need to call if something happens. And I found that gave these guys and girls the freedom to feel like, okay, I can sit here and breathe. I can say how I feel. And then when I'm able to say, you know what? I had a guy in here the other day. I had a girl in here the other day going through the same thing.
Because that's outside the spectrum of the job itself. It's not bringing the insurance involved in it. It's not bringing their department involved in it. You could do it on a one-on-one basis, and nobody knows they have to talk to.
That's right.
So there's no, like Kevin said, no stigmatization.
That word.
Stigmatization.
But here, let me finish my statement real quick before I forget. I don't therapize. Okay. I love that word. I made it up.
Therapize.
I don't even know if it's a word.
It sounds good.
It is now.
Here's what I tell them. We're not here for therapy. We're just here to talk. I might give you some pointers. Coaching. I'm coaching. I have a coach. I have coaches, mentors, right? We normalize it, and we don't let them feel like they're crazy or bad people. You're
I hate
human.
That word crazy. I hate it.
Yeah, you're human. You're human. You're human. We're human. We feel things. It's okay. If you are in law enforcement, first responders, and you're not feeling some type of way when you drag a body out of a fire, or then you're not human.
Then you're crazy.
That's
where
what
the crazy comes in.
I'm glad you're here because you are feeling this way. That's why you're in the game. You're in it for the love of the game, love of humanity. And this is what I tell people, especially with law enforcement. The number one thing I hear a lot of times when they're in the midst of the crap, I think it's time for me to quit. Do you think I should quit? No. You just hit a bump. We don't think about quitting, and we don't argue with God. Because when you're suffering, when you are in the midst of the crap, it's not the time to evaluate your faith or your job. It's time to just
stay in your lane and focus on what you got to
stay in your
focus on.
lane, focus on what you have to focus on, and realize that it will pass.
Now, if you quit at the worst time, then it's never going to get better.
It will not get
It's
better.
never gonna
And
get
you'll
better.
never know what you could have become.
Exactly. Yep.
Now, you've first responders in general and military are type A personalities, and they can become belligerent at times. You being and I hate to
How
say,
about adamant instead of belligerent?
Passionate.
I'm belligerent. No, I get
Passionate.
belligerent when I get uncomfortable. That's why I use that term.
But you can't
Being
spell
a
it.
female, and this, forget about gender roles. You have somebody sitting in front of you, especially a male. Have you ever felt threatened, where you felt uncomfortable or unsafe?
Never with law enforcement or a first responder. Not ever once. I'm treated with the utmost respect. They're hurting. They know it. They know they're there of their own free will. They know that they're there for help, and they know that I'm not going to charge them. I'm not calling their chief, their higher ups.
You mean police and first responders aren't maniacs like the media makes them out to be?
None of them. They have hearts of
Well,
gold.
the reason I think they're like that with you is because they're going there willingly. They're not sent to you by their department.